Welcome to Chief Architect X17. In this What's New video, we'll show you some of the great new features we've added to the new version. So, let's get started and see our new software. In this Chief Architect X17 What's New video segment, I'm going to show off our new productivity features. Let's begin by looking at the new Project Management mode. Project Management is a new system for organizing plans and layouts into projects and will manage links and other files like textures and images. If you have ever saved a copy of a plan and broken links to your layout or shared a plan with missing textures, Project Management can help. Here are a few key points about Project Management mode. A separate training video will provide more details. When you begin a new project, give it a name and choose a new plan and layout template. As your design progresses with an as-built plan, remodel plan, or revisions, the project will manage the references to the plans and layouts even as you create copies and new plans. When you need to share with another designer or a second computer, export the project file and it will contain everything in a single file. For future projects, you can create a new project framework and use that as your starting point to save even more time. In your preferences, you can customize what displays in your status bar at the bottom of the screen. A search function was enabled for the project browser. As more plans and items are visible, you can use search to locate plans, layouts, CAD details, and other items in the project browser. Library search results can be sorted when the library is in the tile mode. Right-click to access the sort menu, and then you can select the sort method. Plan and layout import settings have been consolidated into a single import. Once you choose the plan to import from, you can then select the items to import: defaults, layer sets, saved plan views, walls, and other items. A legacy import is still available if you had exported to one of these file types. Angle snap controls have been separated into their own defaults panel. For allowed angles, you can now choose from an entire list. You can add additional custom angles, and the program will generate the opposing angle for added drawing and snap control for CAD, walls, and other items. When sending a 3D view to the layout, you can specify the resolution for the image and if it has a transparent background. You can now also drag and drop saved views from the project browser to your layout page. There have been a number of new features and improvements in Chief Architect's design, drafting, and building features. Let's begin with the electrical and dimension tools. Electrical boxes now have an explicit gang option to better control items like switches and outlets in proximity to one another. For these 3 individual switches I selected, there is a Make Ganged Electrical Block tool in the lower Edit menu. Once ganged, you can open the object and define the display of the bounding box, wall plate, 3D alignment, and if you want to include the individual switches in the materials list. On the Schedule panel, control for its inclusion. In Plan View, you will then see the wall plate. Electrical circuits can be made to the individual switch and will follow that switch as the gang is moved. The spacing for ganged blocks can be defined in the electrical defaults. Dimension defaults were updated to locate settings by electrical type, including lights, outlets, switches, and other electrical items to make it easier to precisely dimension electrical plans. Temporary dimensions have been relocated from its single default setting and into each individual dimension default for added control over your temporary dimension behaviors. For cabinets, we have improved the 3D modeling and added a thickness control. On this frameless cabinet, you can see that there is a new top stretcher component. On the box construction panel is control for the thickness for sides and the back. If you are dimensioning cabinet openings, the value will be more accurate. When placing a dishwasher in Chief Architect, it was typically inserted into a cabinet. This was nice because an automatic countertop was generated. However, the process did not mimic how it is installed in the field and was not straightforward to learn. So, we changed the process and added an automatic countertop when a dishwasher, wine cooler, or other under-counter appliance is placed. Fixtures and appliances that are inserted into cabinets have new controls for the layer and label. Use the Edit option for the face item, and then you can define the layer. The same process works for the label on the Label panel. You will see the label information in the corresponding schedule. Schedules have a wrapping option to split tables into additional columns. On the Columns and Rows panel is a wrapping category where you can choose the number of items per table or enter a maximum size before the table will split into more columns. An offset setting is the separation distance between the columns. There are additional settings for alignment, the title, and the column headings. This new feature can be particularly helpful to better organize schedules in your layouts. For stairs, there is more control for the display between floors. When there is no stairwell, like exterior stairs, on the Plan Display panel, there's an option to display them on the floor above. A new terrain elevation reference point has been added to define the terrain's elevation relative to the subfloor using a marker. This elevation reference point provides a specific location where the absolute height of the terrain surface is known to assist in positioning the terrain. In the terrain perimeter, remove the automatic elevation setting and choose between Contour 0, which is at the subfloor height, or the reference point. When you select the terrain, you can place, move, and then change the height of the point to assist in positioning the terrain relative to the house. Framing defaults have been centrally located and new framing defaults have been added. For the new automatic framing defaults, you can define the auto-generated framing by category. As we look at the wall framing, there is a drop-down of available framing members you can choose from and a Define option. Under the Define option, you can manage and edit the framing members to customize for your specific design requirements. You can assign the framing member role and type of framing member, and there are panels for setting the line style, fill style, label, components, object information, and schedule for advanced auto framing member customization. These same edits can be done for each of the wall types you have in your plan. The next default is for framing members, where you can manage and edit the framing members. These manual framing defaults allow you to define the general framing members and centrally located defaults for beams and posts. And for truss defaults, there is a new floor and ceiling truss category. When building a foundation, stem walls build at their actual height and exclude the plate height in the dialog, consistent with typical construction. The automatic sill plate that is generated can be changed to treated lumber through the wall's material properties. In post-frame construction, like pole barns, the top and bottom girths of the walls tend to have different properties than the main wall girths. In X17, you can control the sizing of top and bottom horizontal framing members separately through the wall type layer properties for specific girt control and automatic wall framing. For overbuild roof framing, there is an option to control whether or not the shoe plate is generated. And new roof defaults are available for the layer, fill style, and the label for roofs. Both automatic and manual roofs will use these defaults when the roof is created. There have been several enhancements and new features for 3D views in Chief Architect X17. Let's begin with the text annotations in 3D. In X16, we introduced 3D dimensions. In this release, we added text in 3D. From a 3D view, select the Text tool, click to establish the plane, and then enter the text. On the Options panel is a setting for the text to face the camera depending on your preference. When you single-click on the Text Edit handle, a new 3D edit behavior displays to move the text to a specific plane. I will show more on this tool in a sample plumbing plan. Labels will also display in 3D when the layer is on, and you can control how the label is displayed on the Label panel or in the text style defaults. The text will be saved with the camera. It can be isolated by layer and are a great way to annotate your views for clients or contractors. In this 3D plumbing plan, I can use the 3D edit behavior to adjust the plumbing lines. When I click on the end, I can use the 3D edit behavior to select the plane direction. I can then make the edit in that plane. It saves time by avoiding edits that may require separate elevation views or plan views to adjust these 3D objects. A new stationary walkthrough tool is available to create sun studies. Using the stationary walkthrough, you can animate a time-lapse to show how sunlight and shadows interact with your design by day or seasonally. From a 3D view, select the stationary walkthrough tool and define the settings for duration, interpolation type, either time-lapse or seasonal, and then the time range. The program uses that information to generate a sun study style walkthrough with time references. The video can be saved on your Chief Architect Cloud account and shared with your clients. With the new camera setting for water animation, these stationary walkthroughs can include the added sense of movement. Walkthrough keyframes can be multi-selected to make editing easier for similar changes. Keyframes also have a pause direction to create a freeze frame effect for your virtual tours. Finally, sun angles can be derived from a specific frame in the walkthrough. You can use that new sun angle for renderings or walkthroughs. Similar to doors, windows can be displayed open in both 2D and 3D views. From a 3D view, you can click on the window and use the Display Open tool in the lower toolbar. To display windows open in 2D, in the Windows Dialog Options panel, select the Open checkbox, helpful to visualize. On the General panel, you can define the window's swing angle. Our rendering tools have been improved to better visualize both large and small spaces in two ways. First, the 3D cross-section slider is now dynamic. You can make adjustments to the slider, interact with the design, make further slider adjustments without continually opening and closing the tool. Second, the camera setting to hide exterior-facing items now hides items attached to the walls like cabinets, doors, and windows, making it easier to see into small rooms and spaces. A dimming feature has been introduced to change the brightness of lights. Dimming can be accomplished 3 different ways. First, it can be done at the light itself using an Adjust Brightness tool, including the option to turn the light off and on. Second, dimming can be done at the switch for all of the connected lights, a quick way to adjust several lights. And third, through the Adjust Lights dialog and defining the brightness setting. Lights can be dimmed for all rendering techniques, but the effects are most noticeable in the PBR-based views. Anisotropic materials are supported in PBR ray trace views, which will spread light in a more realistic, non-uniform distribution. On the stainless steel table base, you will find a new setting on the Material Property panel. When I turn the anisotropy off, you can see the effect of the light compared to when it is on. The rotation setting allows you to adjust that material further depending on your design. Material maps are also supported for anisotropy and rotation. They will be included in Chief Architect materials as they are updated. A new interactive material editor can be used in 3D to scale, rotate, and offset materials, making it much easier to modify. Found in the 3D menu under Adjust Materials, click on the material to access the reticle. The square handle will change the offset. The circle handle will scale the material uniformly, and the square handles at the ends of the triangle leg segments will scale in the horizontal or vertical directions. Finally, the triangular handle will change the rotation. Interactive material editing directly affects the X and Y scale, horizontal offset, vertical offset, and angle fields on the texture panel of the Material Edit dialog. The tool works in standard, PBR, watercolor, and clay render views. If you plan to use it for a tile installation diagram from an elevation, be sure that Keep Pattern, Texture, and Sync checkbox is selected. Several years ago, Chief Architect implemented an external tool from Adobe to create custom tile, hardwood, masonry, and other materials. In X17, we integrated this material builder tool into our program, making the process much easier. You can access the material builder from the 3D menu, choose the type of material to create, and then make the material by defining its parameters, including grout color. Once you have created the perfect material, use the Add to Library option to import it and the related material maps. There are many great new features in Chief Architect X17, and you can expect to see it in Q2 of 2025. And remember, all software subscriptions include access to the latest version. So, if you are not currently a customer, get started today with Chief Architect.
X17, the way we do our release cycle here is we put it out in a beta format, and we plan to do that here in the next week or couple weeks. So it'll be early May, and then about 6 to 8 weeks after that, we do a final release. And if you do the math on that, that should be by the end of Q2 approximately is when that will release out. So those are a couple of things I just wanted to point out. If you do have questions, we'll be happy to take those live. And if you want to just raise your hand in the GoToWebinar control panel, then we'll call on you. When we call on you, make sure you unmute your microphone, tell us who you are and where you're calling from. So with that, let's go ahead and see if there's any questions out there, Carrie.
Hey, Scott, we have a first question from Charles. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hey, Scott. My question is about the schedules. First of all, I think the schedule wrapping is a great idea. But my question about it is, will you be able to change the font size without affecting the whole box size of the schedule? As right now, if you change the font of the text in a schedule, it increases the size of the entire box.
Okay. So let's, I'm not sure if we've made a change to that, but let's go ahead and open up one of our schedules here. Let me slide down and we'll grab one of our schedules here. Let's just grab our Windows schedule. And let's take a look and see if we can answer your question. So you want to be able to change the text inside of the schedule itself, and let's turn on our active layer display. So right now I have that on the schedule text style, right? So if I make an adjustment in here, let's just maybe change the font. Let's increase that to 8 or 9. See if that. So that adjusted the entire box, I believe, Charles.
Right, right. And what I'm asking is if you can do it without changing the size of the box, or if that's something that's in the works.
I believe the answer is we can't do that, but I'll pause here and see if any of the other chief staff members want to weigh in on that question at all.
Are you asking if you can change maybe the title to be bigger, separate from the cell text? Because you can do that Scott, if you open up the schedule dialog there.
Yeah, that's not what I'm asking. I'm just asking if the text within the schedule boxes can be changed without affecting the whole size of the box. Because if you, one of the complaints I've had is that my text is unreadable in the schedules if I'm trying to fit the schedule into a plan or into a layout. And when you go ahead and increase the schedule text, then it blows the box up. I mean, one way to rectify that is to eliminate the 3D views, but I like to include the 3D views so, you know, it's easier to identify what the product is.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
I think so. So we'll have to make a note of that request. So to be able to change the font size, but to leave the cells in the table here in the schedule in the same orientation they were before you changed the font size.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we'll make a note of that, Charles.
Okay. Thank you, Scott.
Yeah. Thanks for calling in. Carrie, more questions out there?
Yeah, our next question is from Bahram. Hi, Bahram. Go ahead and ask your question.
My question has to do with terrain coming in, and I use Civil 3D to generate the terrain, and that's more powerful because that's what it does. But when I bring it in, can I bring in the 3D terrain in 3D so that I can use it? So far, I've been creating it into a solid, and then I'm bringing that solid in and fitting the house on top of it.
Yeah.
The other question is like features in the landscape, like driveway and pathways. How do you make those to follow the terrain and with the slope and so forth? So the driveways usually have a slope, but I don't know how to do that.
Yeah, sure. Well, Raham, where are you calling from today?
I'm in California right now.
Okay. So your first question about importing a terrain. So in the program, we import DWG information. And if you happen to have that from a surveyor, do you ever get your terrain data from a surveyor?
Yeah, I'm also a civil engineer, so I create that.
Okay.
And I can bring it in. I use Autodesk Civil 3D.
Okay. So when you go through the import wizard in the program and you point it to the DWG file that has the survey information in there, you can then flag the terrain perimeter and the elevation data. And then when you import that, we will then interpolate that and you'll get your 3D information for your terrain. There's a video that walks you through a real example of that process. Maybe one of the chief staff members here can chat that out. And so it will walk you through step by step on how that process works.
Okay.
And then once you have your terrain, let's assume that there's some sort of a slope to it. Things like roads and fences and other items that sit on top of the terrain, they will then follow that geometry of the terrain itself. So that happens automatically once you have the terrain in place.
Okay.
Yeah. So take a look at that video. and see if that works for you. Oftentimes I've seen those files come in from AutoCAD files, and sometimes it's of the entire county. And the biggest challenge there is figuring out which layer is which to point it to the terrain perimeter and the elevation data. So.
Okay, and the second, if I may ask another question, is that if I do a site, the whole site, and I want to have several homes on the same site and lay out the whole development,
Sure.
is that possible, or how do you do that?
So you can have more than one structure on the terrain, and once you have the terrain in, then your structures aren't, limited to one. You can have multiple on there. So that's certainly a doable thing.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for calling in today.
Thank you.
Carrie?
Scott, yep. Our next question is from Damon. Hi, Damon. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, perhaps this has been solved already, although I have been on the Chief Talk forums, and then other people have given me differing informations, but quite commonly, if I have multiple kind of room dividers within a space, like for example, one of my most recent plans had an open shower space, so there was no doors into the shower space. So it was just like an invisible wall, just a room divider in between the main bathroom space and the shower space. The light data did not come through that invisible wall.
Okay.
And from my research and from speaking to other people, that is a known thing.
Okay.
That will happen, and it's on multiple plans. But I'm not sure if that's just a me issue, or if that, or if this will address that.
Sure. So let's just draw an area that might be a shower over here. Damon, where are you calling from today?
Well, I'm Kendall. I'm on Damon's account right now.
You're Kendall. Okay.
I'm Kendall, but that's fine. I'm from British Columbia, Canada.
Okay. Okay. So I've got a larger room here. I just drew a 4-inch wall, and then I'm going to use the invisible wall tool here. Okay, and we'll just assume that's a shower room, and then let's put a couple of lights in there.
Yeah,
like
I will find that like it's when during a lot of my renderings, I have a lot of light data, right?
Okay.
There's lights coming from multiple sources, and so yeah, I've had it in like larger open spaces where I needed an invisible wall to get different ceiling height.
Okay.
Between, let's say, like a kitchen and a living room.
Okay.
Anyways, but
so if you have a lot of lights and you're not seeing the light come through, this isn't a great rendering here, but I've got an invisible wall there. You can tell that there's a separation because of the wall, the floor surface, right?
yeah.
Have you used light sets?
I mean, I've played around with my light data in the rendering view.
Yeah. So let's just pick on one of these guys here real quickly, and close one of those. And let me open up one of my cameras here.
I mean, if this is if I just need to be going to, the support team for some troubleshooting, I can do that. I don't want to take up everyone else's questions as well, but.
So here's what happens when you take a 3D view and you've got a lot of lights. The program does the best that it can to assume which lights you want on. And if you run into a situation where you're not seeing the lights cross a boundary, okay, I almost always use what's called a light set, and I force the program to turn on specific lights for a couple of rooms. So if you were to pick on this view that I have open, and I go into the Edit Active view and down to Adjust Lights. Do you see this okay?
Yeah.
So in the Adjust Lights, I'm using a light set called Bath. And if we just sort
Okay.
based on what's on, so then I can force which lights are turned on for this camera. So I've got, I don't know, 25 very specific lights that I want turned on in this view. And so that way it is going to force the program to say, hey, look, I want to make sure that these lights are on. And when you have a very simple, camera view that only has a few lights on it, you probably don't ever have to worry about that, because if you're talking about, half a dozen lights, I think the default's 20 lights. But if you are seeing that, create a light set and then go in and turn on the specific lights that you want for your room scene.
Sounds great. I appreciate it. Thanks.
Yep. Carrie, more
Scott?
questions?
Yes, Mark would like you to demonstrate real quick how the pan and scale tool works.
Okay, sure. Mark, are you online here?
He wrote in his question.
Okay. Let me generate an overhead view of this scene here. It might be easier to see that real quickly. So we've introduced a new material editor program capability. And so if I kind of scroll over here, let's see if we can get into the bath. Here we go. Okay, so I've got the material on here, and when I come over into the 3D tools, okay, and you come over into, where is this tool? Adjust materials, and then it's called the interactive material editor. And I'll just kind of pause there for a second, make sure everybody can see that okay. So now I've got the icon here, and once I click on it, this is what you probably saw in the video, I can now move this information around, since those are all the materials, you're seeing it on all of the walls, right? So if I wanted to align the tile, you see how I can slide over and then the tile then might match up on one side. There's a scaling factor in here, so if I want to make the tile larger, and then there's a scaling factor on the X and Y that you want to make the material and stretch it. And then the final one is this rotate option where you can rotate the material around. And so if you're going to be doing a tile installation program, if we were in a vector view, which is typical maybe used for a tile, you may not see the same effect here because this is restricted to the standard view, but make sure your line drawing is on in the standard view, and then that line drawing should translate and your vector view should look good for a tile installation diagram. So it's a fun new tool. Hopefully it makes it easy so you don't have to go into the material and calculate the X and Y offsets as well as the scaling, and should be very helpful in adjusting materials.
Thanks, Scott.
Yep.
Our next question is from Bill. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question. Okay, our next question is from Nicole. Hi, Nicole. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi there. I'm in Michigan, and my question may not be appropriate at this moment for this forum, but I am just starting out, and we deal with Ritz-Craft homes, which I'm told we can just import in. So some of these more details I might not be making sense to me just yet, but instead of drawing this house and putting all this together from from the trusses on up, that would already be something that I can import and manipulate there. That might be my first question, and then again might have to speak to somebody via email and what would be the best way for me to start this out.
Okay, sure, Nicole. Ritz-Craft Homes, if they have their plans available and share them with you, then you should be able to open them, and I don't know how much detail they would have in there, but whatever they provide to you should be able to have a starting point, manipulate them as you need to, and if you do have questions, I know our sales staff are pretty familiar with the Ritz-Craft account, so you can just give us a shout and see if we can point you in the right direction.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, hey, thanks for calling in, Nicole.
Scott, we had several people write in and ask if you could demonstrate how to animate the water.
How to animate the water. I noticed that on the on the video walkthrough that we were doing. Let me close a couple of these things here. It didn't show up very well on the video, so let me scroll out here. I've got a bunch of cameras saved, probably too many, and let's see if I can open up one of these. Cameras. So there's a setting, once this camera opens up, there's a setting inside of the camera options, and it's just a check mark here that will indicate if the water is going to be animated. And give this a second to open up. It's a little bit slower, I noticed, on the streaming of the Zoom. And you may not be able to see this very well. Let me see if I can zoom in just a little bit and see if you can see some of it moving. Give that a chance to refresh. And so I'll point you to where that setting is. Under the Edit Active View tool, there is an option for your animation of water underneath the rendering technique, and it's the option for animate water. And so as long as you have that on, the water will animate. There's also some settings in the material properties itself where you can control the type of water animation. So if I use the Adjust Material Definition tool, and I'll give that a second here to refresh. And I'm going to click on the water using the Adjust Material Definition tool. And we come over into the properties of the water, and you'll notice that, first of all, the material class is water, okay? And then here are your options that you can choose from for the style of animation. And then there's also settings for wave chop, wind speed, wind direction. So if there's any kiteboarders out there, maybe you can get some high levels of wind and set that up and create a maybe a rough scene on the lake if you're doing any lake house designs. So that's underneath the Define Material Properties. Once you've set your material properties as water and then set your camera to animate water, then you'll get a scene where the water is flowing. Also works in walkthroughs.
Awesome, thank you. Our next question is from Cody. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi there, I'm from Nebraska.
Hi, Cody.
So my question, one thing I'm really excited for is the windows. I've been asking for that for like years, I think now.
Okay, open windows.
I was wondering, is that going to be only specified to casement windows, or will we be able to do awnings and double hungs and things like that?
Should be any window that is not fixed. So anytime that you have a window, if I come in here and let me change one of these windows, I think that's probably a fixed window. So let's switch that over to a double hung, okay? And then if we click the open button, you can see it's open. You can define how far it's open. And again, if we switch that over to maybe something like a single casement, and let's also take a look at, there's an option in here to display it open in a 2D view. So I have to explicitly go in there and show that. And then when I return back to the 2D view, you can see it looks a lot like a door. But if you had something, maybe a patio set out there and you wanted to make sure that it didn't interfere with it, then you have that option to display it in the plan view as well. Does that work?
Yeah, I used to just use doors and raise them up from the floor, and it always looked weird.
Right. Right.
And then also, if you don't mind, I had one other quick kind of question. When you were
Okay.
answering the question about the lighting,
Uh-huh.
you showed that bathroom render. How did you get the water in the sink and the tub? Is that just a 3D solid?
Oh, yeah. See if I still, yeah, I don't have that camera open. See if I still have that. Yeah, I get that question quite a bit. I'll reopen one of these cameras here. So the scenario is when you want to put something like water in the bathtub or in the sink, then what you can do is put something in there and then spray it with water. It could be another countertop, it could be a 3D solid, and then you can just set the elevation and position of it. So that's what's done here.
Okay, and then will you also be able to animate that water too then?
Oh yeah, sure. Yeah, yep.
Cool.
So if you wanted to, just click on that. I'm not sure that I actually have that as a water material. I have it just as a general material. But if I switch that over to water, okay, and then, basic wave, then I'd probably have to change my camera setting here to animate water. I'm not sure that setting is on. This view is quite heavy here because I got a lot of moving parts in here. And I got line drawing on. But if I go in and make sure that the animate water is checked, may be difficult to see. It'll be a second here since that's going to resolve. Line drawing adds quite a bit to your rendering. But it's actually animating. Again, you may not be able to see it easily through the streaming of Zoom, but we'll give that a second. Yeah, I noticed Zoom doesn't do well with pushing video through the system, but it's got some movement in there, and so that's how you do that, Cody.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Yeah, those
You
are
bet.
two of my biggest wish list items, so I'm excited for that.
Okay, great.
All right,
Carrie,
Scott,
more.
let's check in with Vicki. Hi, Vicki. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, Scott. Vicki, I'm over in Bend, Oregon. Hi.
Hi, Vicki and Bend.
This may not have anything to do with Release 17, although I wish it did. One of my pet peeves, and I've put this into suggestions in the forum before, when I bring in, say, a DWG from a surveyor, all the text comes in as rich text.
Okay.
And if there was, say, a phrase that was wrapped in his 2 lines, it comes in as 2 separate lines in rich text.
Okay.
I only use rich text for my annotations. Is there a way to bring it in and not have it be in rich text, or to convert rich text to plain text? I know we can convert plain text to rich text. Can you do the opposite? Or can you select what format of text is going to happen when you bring in something? And if not, can you do that?
Yeah, so you're importing a DWG, and the program has a rich text and it has a simple text with a few variations and differences. You want the text components to go on a, so to speak, simple text area. Is that fair?
Yes.
So I'm not sure if the mapping in the DWG wizard allows that, and I may pause here and see if any staff members know if that import wizard allows you to map to the simplified text. Anybody?
I don't believe we currently support that, Scott. I think it's something we have had requested a few times. I haven't found Vicky's request here in our database.
Okay. Well, you're not alone, Vicki, unless that's your request and you keep pushing the button. Yeah, so we'll make sure that we add one more to that. And yeah, I could see the need for that, sure.
Thanks,
Okay.
Scott.
Yep,
Considered
thanks for
another
calling.
official suggestion.
Okay. Thanks, Vicki. Have a great day.
Scott, do you have time for a couple more questions?
Yeah, so we probably have time for a couple more, and then what we'll end up doing is I'll make sure everybody can get out of here in an hour. If there's still questions beyond that, so we'll do a kind of a closure and talk about some upcoming events, and then if there's still questions, we can come back. So why don't we take maybe a couple more questions, and then we'll go through and talk about what's upcoming.
Okay, we have Renee next. Go ahead and unmute yourself and ask your question, Renee.
Hey, Studley.
Renee, how are you?
Oh, good. I was trying to sneak in there and answer that civil engineers guy's question.
Yeah.
Yeah, that software can export to CSV, so that's probably going to be the best way to import is import
Okay.
CSV.
Okay, sure. Have you used that then?
Yeah, I have, and that works really well.
Okay,
So,
good. Okay.
that was it. Actually, I had one more question. With the new consolidated plan imports, does that import default settings for floor structure?
Yeah, I saw your question come in a little earlier, and so you want your floor structure thickness or whatever it's made out of to come in with the import?
Yeah, and relative heights and everything like that.
You know, I don't think it does, but Brian, you want to add anything to that?
Nothing has changed between X16 and X17 in that area, so it should work the same as it did in X16.
Okay,
I
gotcha.
don't believe that we import any of that stuff yet.
So that,
right.
you know, obviously that means that needs to come from your template file type thing.
Yeah, understood.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Okay. Thanks, Renee.
Scott, our next question is from Mark. Go ahead and ask your question, Mark.
Hello, Mark, or Scott, can you hear me?
Hey, Mark, where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Montana.
Oh, okay.
So just over the border from you.
Yeah, giddy up.
I use a service here out of Missoula that gives me recap files or LiDAR scans so I can build, and then I can take a section of that and create a PNG, and then import that so that I can put that on my section cut in Chief, and then verify that all my heights are correct.
Okay.
The thing is that PNGs have not been, you haven't been able to make them transparent before.
Okay.
And I understand there's a new transparency feature, because at the moment my workaround is I have to put them on an object and then as a material, a new material, and then set that material's transparency to 60%. And then when I go to select things, I have to select either through the object or make sure it's in the back. But I think that X17 was promoting that we're going to be able to import PNGs and make them transparent now.
So you've taken this image that's a PNG image and you've created a 3D object, maybe it's a 3D solid or something, and applied it on there so you can see it.
Just a face.
Yeah, right. And I actually think that's probably the best way to do it, but I may pause here and see if anybody else wants to weigh in. I don't think you can just bring in a PNG and have it floating out there with transparency, but I'll see if anybody else wants to add to that. Crickets, I guess.
I thought it was a new feature that we were getting was
no. Well, one of the features that we're enabling you to do is in the project browser. You can drag and drop from the project browser. So if you did have an image and you wanted to drag it into your layout file, or you had an elevation and you wanted to drag it into your layout file, that's one of the things, as well as if you had a 3D view up on your screen and you wanted to send that out to layout, you can specify the image resolution of that. So those are some of the things there that are new with kind of respect to images and or drag and drop. And I believe the way that you're doing it right now would be to, apply it onto a face and use your process now.
So in the
we'll
sneak peek,
there
was something about a new transparency feature. What was that in regard to then?
Yeah, I don't think
I
it's
think you mentioned exporting views with a transparent background.
Oh, it's an export.
Yeah, it was an export feature so that the maybe it shows a transparent background instead of the backdrop, I believe.
Okay.
Or one of the rendering techniques, I think.
Yeah. So Mark, I think you're using the best process you have now. I'll make sure that we capture, a request to be able to put a PNG file out there, and I've done the same thing with like fire and some of that stuff that you want to put in a fireplace, and you have to put it on a surface of some sort for it to show up. So I'll make sure that we capture the request to be able to do it without applying it onto a surface.
Yeah, it'd be fantastic, because with all the new technology of us using these LiDAR scans, when you're doing a section, it covers the entire section.
Mm-hmm.
So it's hard to select through.
Yeah. Out of curiosity, which LiDAR technology are you using?
The guy that I use is it's 3D verified on Missoula, but I'm not sure. It's on a tripod. Mm-hmm. And then he exports the point cloud to me, and then I import that using Autodesk Recap, which you can actually just get the trial version for anybody who they're not an AutoCAD user. It's really simple to use, and you can do slices and all sorts of stuff. And when the trial runs out, it's still very usable. So I pay for it because I kind of want some extra features, but people can use that to really check their drawings.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Great. Well, thanks for calling in, Mark. And Carrie, why don't I go through a couple of closing remarks here? And one of the things I want to point out, first of all, thanks everybody for attending today's session. We will be sending out a recording of the session here in the next day or so. In there, we'll also have a survey if we could maybe ask for your feedback on it so we can improve on future events. Over the next several weeks, we're going to be putting together another series of webinars, same time, same place, at Thursdays at noon. So next week, we'll be back here, and one of the new features that's quite a bit of a change in maybe workflow management for those of you that have been using the program for a bit is a tool called Project Mode. So this encapsulates your plan file, your layout file, some other files, and hopefully makes it easy to manage revisions, as well as if you have change orders and your as-built files into a single container. So it's a pretty powerful tool. There's some changes that you'll probably want to take a look at for your workflow. So we're going to be talking about that in detail for next week's webinar. And then after that, we've got a 3D walkthrough and sun study animation, followed by custom tiles and materials with the new material builder. And then we'll be talking about rendering, lighting, visualization of small spaces, a couple of tools there that we've improved on for visualizing small spaces like bathroom, focusing on 3D text and dimensions. And then finally, the final session will be on productivity tips with the new tools that are in X17. So with that, I would like to thank everybody for attending today's session. Have a great day, and hopefully we will see you back here next Thursday for Project Mode in X17. Have a great day.